Now to the lack of representation. It is something we hear about time and again, whether it's in movies or corporate America, but the topic is so much more complex than that, particularly in the Latino community. Whether you're Mexican American, Honduran American, or Dominican American and beyond, it's often referred to as living in the hyphen. If you're not familiar with that phrase, we're gonna break it down for you right now. Joining me are two hilarious comedians who have taken this topic and tackled it head on. The hosts of the Hyphenated podcast. There they are right there, Joanna, Hausmann, and Lorenzo. Thank you so much for being here with us. So your podcast, with its nearly 40 episodes, it's very wide-ranging. You cover a lot. You're both comedians, but on Hyphenated, you really go there with topics from the use of the word Latinx to the political crisis in Cuba. What made you decide that you weren't just going to be funny? You weren't just going to be entertaining, but also thought-provoking. Jenny, kick it off. Kick it off for us.
Oh my gosh. I think it's something that honestly happened organically because Joanna and I have really only seen each other in person for a whole of 45 minutes. That is fact. But we've been good friends and made each other crack up all these years. And so we thought, yeah, let's do this. It's going to be so relatable. And, you know, it's going to be about living in the hyphen and all this. But as the conversations went on, we really wanted to touch upon these more serious topics because they're important to us. And it's a way for our audience to see a different side of who we are other than our comedy.
Absolutely. And Joanna, what about you? What made you kind of break this down in this way?
So I've been creating comedy online specifically about the duality of my identity since like 2012. And through comedy, through 5-minute videos, you know, talking about the difference between Argentinians and Venezuelans, how Dominicans speak Spanish differently than Mexicans. And although that was very fulfilling, there was something that was sort of lacking, which was the more nuanced conversations about stuff that isn't really easy to answer. You know, how do we feel about the term Latinx? How do we feel about the inherent sexism sometimes in our communities? How do we feel about the fact that politicians usually put us into a monolith? These are conversations that are very difficult to sort of break down in very easy and, you know, funny 5-minute videos. These are conversations that merit, you know, longer, more drawn out conversations. And that's what we've tried to do in this podcast.
And conversations that are educating so many people. So I want to discuss your identity policing on social media episode. Joanna, you started off the episode discussing a Twitter back and forth that you got into with someone over your identity as a Jewish Venezuelan American. Tell us a little bit about the range of critiques that you get, from the constructive to the unfortunate anti-Semitic. How do you deal with that?
Oh my goodness. I remember that the first video I ever published online where I sort of broke down the misconceptions of being Latino, I remember reading the comments and saying, oh my goodness, should I go back online? This is really tough to read. And then I realized that a lot of the people that didn't see me as Latina were also not seeing a lot of my friends who were Latino as Latino, whether they be Afro-Latino, Asian Latino, like me, a Jewish Latina. The idea of what a Latino or Latina is something that is very misinterpreted and misrepresented. So when I get comments online that sort of tell me I am not Latina, that I take as sort of a responsibility to prove them wrong and show them that I am, and not only me, but so many other people that they assume are not. And there's a lot of identity policing within this community. And I think it comes from the fact that, you know, the word Latino encapsulates over 20 countries with different idioms, with different cultures, with different idiosyncrasies. People are trying to fight their way up to be the Latino. There isn't one Latino. It's impossible. That word is just sort of amorphous in its inception and its in its use. So for me, every time I get a criticism, it is just fuel for me to not only speak about my experience, but bring forth people, not only to the podcast, but on other things that I'm creating that don't represent that stereotype, to break that stereotype.
Right, and you nailed it. The Latino community is a melting pot within a melting pot, basically. Jenny, you also discussed the backlash you received from posting your Ancestry.com DNA results and how you had to pull down your video. Being a proud Cuban American from Miami, describe that whiplash that you felt when you're told by anyone, let alone another Latino, that you're not Latina enough.
You know, it is a fear that I had from the moment I decided that I was going to do this for a living, and specifically as a comedian, represent my culture in this way, because I could have gone in a different route. And that was something that I dealt with back when I was an actor in Miami. I was told that I should change my last name, and, you know, I should tell my agents that I don't speak Spanish. And I did that for a while, because that was unfortunately the norm and what was required of a lot of Latino actors. And thankfully things are changing. But when it came to the backlash, specifically with that video, I shouldn't say I was surprised, because I really wasn't surprised. I've been making internet content for so long, and I've been trolled for anything ranging from the way I sound to, again, my heritage and not being Cuban enough. But I think when it really hit me was when I was working at BuzzFeed. It was my first job out here in Los Angeles, and I was one of the co-founders of Pero Like. And I was terrified because I'm used to character acting. People are used to seeing me as different characters with different wigs. No one really knew who I was as Jenny Lorenzo on this brand new, gigantic platform that reaches till this day millions and millions of people.
Right.
And so I remember I was one of the only Cuban Americans specifically at the company. And so of course I'm making content that's very Caribbean, that's very Cuban centric. And some of the comments at the time were like, why is this girl our Cuban representation? That's not how my family is, or that's not what I look like. And, you know, and I was like much younger back then, and I was obviously hurt. And I'm not saying it doesn't still sting, but I think I've learned to really understand and empathize with these sorts of complaints. And it comes down to the fact that there's so little representation in media that when you're the one Guatemalan that's either a content creator or an actor, all the Guatemalans are going to look at that one Guatemalan and go, oh my gosh, they better fit the exact experience that I've lived. If not, they're not a real Guatemalan. And so there's a lot of pressure to be that like one Cuban at BuzzFeed, you know? Like,
exactly.
Being like, this is how my family does it, but your family might not, and that's okay.
Right. Well, progress is slow, ladies. We have seen it, but we have to stick with it. Para adelante. Thank you so much. And Jenny, we look forward to your work with Disney Plus, of course, ABC's parent company. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.